Hello everyone, I'm Tivanny Meilina and I want to present about the Edwardian era. How the Victorian era affected Edwardian literature. The Edwardian era literature marked by the end of the longest reign in British history until then the reign of Queen Victoria. Edwardian writers create protagonists who see through and think critically about moralism and technological advances in the preceding eras of the emergence of new kings and new centuries. Edwardian writers like E.M. Forster, Joseph Conrad, and H.G. Wells built upon the social conscience of Victorian era 1837 until 1901. Writers such as Charles Dickens and Charlotte Brontë. Their epic builds romance, Oliver Twist and Jane Eyre, probed at the disparity between social class, gender and family hierarchies. Later writers expanded upon these themes by satirizing the discrimination inherent and in Victorian ideas towards different classes and foreign cultures. Edwardian era writers focused on the bigger picture. Subversive ideas were presented metaphorically, symbolically, and in opposition to the liberating force of nature. Along with the exploration of ingrained bias, Edwardian era writers also examined the fears and social anxiety surrounding technological advances. The Victorian era saw over 18,000 miles of railways in Britain by 1900. In the creation of new communication technologies, of the most memorable being invention of the telephone by Alexander Bell 1876. As mass imports, exports and travel became easier, fears arose that consumerism and the sudden leap forward in technology would change society for the worse. Philosopher John Stuart Mill expressed his concern about this increased production, industrialization, and progression on the literary world in his essay Civilization 1836, in which he stated his views on human improvement. He wrote that when there were few books and when few read at all save those who had been accustomed to reading the best authors, books were written with the well-grounded expectation that they would be read carefully, and if they deserve it, would be read often. Mill goes on to write that the rewards were then for him who wrote well, not much for the laborious and learned, not the crude and informed writer. But now the case is reversed. It's important to know that in America this period was called the Gilded Age, or also known as the Progressive Era. Then came the Lost Generation, which refers to writers who spoke about the pain of World War I and the time after it, including Ernest Hemingway and Francis Scott Fitzgerald, who came into prominence after the World War I and whose works reflected a deep disillusionment with their society, but that's to be spoken for another time, as it moves into post-war modernist literature. Despite the Edwardian era being one of the shortest periods in English history, it was still a very strong and influential period in English literature, as it, in my opinion, created a base for modernist literature to come to life. As known as I know, a time in 20th century British history, first decade of the century, when Edward VII, the eldest son of Queen Victoria, was king. The Edwardian period was known for elegance and luxury among the rich and power, but also for morallessness and for a general failure to prepare for some of the challenge of the 20th century, particularly World War I, which broke out 4 years after the death of King Edward.